Remembrance Day honours those who serve to defend our democratic freedoms and way of life. Every year, around November 11th, we fall silent for 2 minutes to pay tribute to the men and women who fought and served the United Kingdom and Ireland in many different conflicts around the world. This year, we can also use it to recognise those in countries where conflict is ongoing. Regardless of your faith, culture, or background, today we can unite to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and the innocent civilians whose lives are at risk due to conflict and acts of terrorism. On Remembrance Day, we bring to mind not just those people who fought and died in World War I over 100 years ago, but also those affected by World War II and by other wars since 1945. Why November the 11th? It was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month that World War I ended in 1918. At 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, the guns fell silent, the killing stopped. This was the armistice. An agreement to stop fighting. When World War I was over, people wanted to mark the event on this special day.
Often we meet people who from their manner, job or circumstance may seem to be ordinary people with ordinary lives, yet they may actually be someone very extraordinary. For example, have you heard of McCrae's battalion in 1914? The 16th Battalion of the Royal Scots was raised by Sir George McCrae a few months after the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, and was the first so-called footballers or sporting battalions during this period of the war. 16 players connected from Hearts Midlothian Football Club enlisted in the army, with many of them joining McCrae's own. The battalion also received footballers from a number of other clubs, including Raith Rovers, Falkirk, Dunfermline Athletic, Highbury, St Bernard's and East Fife. Hundreds of supporters, practically from Hearts and Hibs, signed up, as did notable players from other athletics from sports.
Please watch this video to understand the sacrifice that these men played in the war.
A century ago, 51 Scottish battalions fought in the Battle of the Somme. In this tiny French village, one of them, the 16th Royal Scots, is being remembered.
Welcome to Contal Maison on this 100th anniversary of the commencement of the Battle of the Somme.
The story of McCrae's battalion is one that lay forgotten for decades, but in recent years it's re-entered the public consciousness. There are more than 600 people at this service, British and French, military and veterans, young and old. In this centenary year, it's one of the biggest commemorative events on the Somme. But who were McCrae's battalion, and how has their story touched so many lives? To know more, we have to go back to their enigmatic commanding officer and namesake, Colonel Sir George McCrae. Jack Alexander is a historian who has dedicated his life to researching the story of McCrae. In 1914, the old soldier and politician had blackmailed the War Office into letting him raise a battalion. He was 53. At a packed Usher Hall in Edinburgh on the 27th of November, his recruiting campaign began.
He was a very well-known man in Scotland in 1914, that rare thing, a respected and much loved politician. He received permission from the War Office to raise a battalion, but he didn't say to young men, it's your duty to enlist. He didn't stand on the platform like many public figures, fat, complacent, comfortable, and say it's your duty to go. He said, I'm going to France to fight the Germans, will you come with me?
It was one of the fastest recruitments of the First World War, and in just 2 weeks, more than 1,300 men had volunteered. But 2 days before Colonel McCrae gave his famous speech, he'd already had some new recruits. 11 players from the Heart of Midlothian Football Club in Edinburgh, with 2 more to follow. 1914 and the Hearts boys were training just like this. Their future that season looked bright. They won their first 8 league games on the trot, including a 2-0 victory over reigning champions Celtic. But the war was calling, and with it the beginning of a campaign that demanded universal commitment. professional sportsmen, in particular footballers, soon found themselves the target. Footballers were picked out in the press as shirkers and cowards. Hearts were particularly targeted, but the men who were close friends responded to the criticism in a very singular way. They signed up.
The enlistment of the Hearts players took place on the same day that the anti-football campaign asked a question in the Houses of Parliament of the Prime Minister to have football stopped. So the enlistment of the Hearts players prevented the stoppage of football during the war.
They played together, they trained together, and that was part of the thing for George McCrae, is he wanted them to serve together. And part of the director's statement at the time was that all recruits, new recruits, should say that they want to be part of the Hearts battalion.
The Hearts' esprit de corps inspired hundreds in their wake. It was the first sporting battalion of its kind. Kenny West's great-grandfather Archie was moved.
I think he was just a normal bloke, normal guy. He signed up with his friends, obviously, right when the battle cry went out. He was a Hearts fan, and all his friends did obviously signed up to that. And no military experience before that, etc. Went away, trained, and went over to France, and unfortunately died August 16.
Local ties also played a huge part in recruitment for the 16th Royal Scots. In Dunfermline in Fife, a young George McCrae worked for a local linen firm, where he met his future wife, Lizzie Russell. Gary Davidson is her great-great-nephew.
I think it was love at first sight. They fell in love. She became the apple of George's eye, and the rest is history. As I say, the romance blossomed here in Dunfermline. They were married in Dunfermline 2 years later from first meeting.
The Dunfermline connection inspired around 100 men from the town to sign up for McCrae's battalion, including 7 players from Dunfermline Athletic Football Club. Very soon they were seeing action on the first day of the Battle of the Somme.
We have 2 players from the club who were both killed on that day. First of them is a chap called Morton, Jimmy Morton, who's here, James S. Morton. And along with that, there was a colleague of his called Davy Islet, who was a plumber. He played from 1910 to 1914. It's very clear that whilst they weren't looking for a fight per se, they weren't going to back off one, and they felt that wrong had been done, and they were going to stand up.
In total, 75 football clubs from across Scotland would send men to McCrae's battalion, and rugby players, cricketers and other sports stars also signed up. In Fife, 7 players from Wraith Rovers would go to war with McCrae. But as military training began in earnest in 1915, the men of the sporting battalion began to feel the strain. Long marches and drill until the early hours, and the next day back on the pitch. The Scottish teams who had committed players slid down the league.
You're trying to work hard and picking your team and getting your team prepared for a game, and then these guys are going to war maybe the next again day, and some of them never came back, so it must have been very, very difficult. But again, it showed the character of these players at the time, and the management team and the supporters of the club, that they all felt it was really important to go away to war.
These players and their fans stood up and served with rugby and cricket players following suit. How you choose to remember them is up to you. Some people choose to wear a poppy, but this is never compulsory. When and how you choose to remember them is a reflection of your individual experiences and personal memories.
This Remembrance Day, we want to make sure every soldier is remembered, British and colonial subjects alike. Let us end with a poem from an anonymous black soldier which tells their experience of the war. The bugle called and forth we went, to serve the crown our backs far bent, and build whate'er that must be done, but near to fire an angry gun. No heroes we know, nay not one, with deep lament we do our job. Despite the shame our manhood robbed, we built and fixed again, to prove our worth as proud black men, and hasten sure the Kaiser's end. From Scotia Port to Seaford Square, across to France the conflict there. At Villa Joux and Place Péronne, for God and King to right the wrong. The number 2, 600 strong, striped to the waist and sweaty chest. Midday's reprieve, which much needed rest, we dug and hauled and lifted high, from trenches deep toward the sky. Non-fighting troops, and yet we died, the peace restored, the battle won. Black sweat and toil had beat the Hun, black hood was spilled, black bodies maimed, for medals brave, no black was named. Yet proud we were, our pride unshamed, but time will bring forth other wars. Then give to us more daring chores, that we might prove our courage strong, preserve the right, repel the wrong, and proud will sing the battle song. Please welcome some of our senior pupils who are going to perform Green Fields of France. The words will show upon the screen for you to follow along.
Well, howdy do, young Willie McBride. Do you mind if I sit here by down your graveside and rest for a while in the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done.
I see by your gravestone you were only 19 when you joined the Grace Poland in 1916. I hope you die well and I hope you die clean. Oh, Billy McCrae was his slow and obscene. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? The sun now it shines on the green fields of France. There's a warm summer breeze that makes red poppies dance. And look how the sun shines from under the clouds. There's no gas, no barbed wire, there's no guns firing now. But here in this graveyard it's still no man's land. The countless white crosses that attend the sand. To make light indifference to his fellow man, to a whole generation our butchered and down. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest?
Young Willie McBride, I can't help wonder why. Do those that lie here know why did they die? And did they believe when they answered the cost? Did they really believe that this war would end wars?
The sorrow, the suffering, the glory, the pain, the killing and dying were all done in vain. For young Willie McBride it all happened again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife slowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post in chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest?
They shall grow not old, as they are left to grow old, as we are left to grow old.
Turn to
Each shall
striker.
not. Sorry?
Turn to striker.
Okay. They shall not grow old as we that are left to grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
At 11 o'clock on Remembrance Sunday, there is a 2-minute silence to remember those who died in war. Ours is not a silent word. There is noise all around us, so silence is special. Silence helps us to stop thinking about what's going on right now or what we have to do next. Silence lets us pause to reflect. We'll now watch a short video of the last post as we remember all those who have fallen in conflict. We'll then hold our 2 minutes in silence. There will be a silent video on to accompany this.
As a sign of respect, some of our members of the Pupil Leadership Team will lay wreaths. Robin, our head girl, will then lead a time for reflection and a short prayer.
In times of conflict, ordinary people may find themselves performing extraordinary acts. Our acts of remembrance, big or small, public or private, are valuable to remember those who are braced or lost their lives. Let us pray for all who suffer as a result of conflict and ask that God may give us peace. Remember all the servicemen and women who have died in the violence of war. For all members of armed forces who are in danger today, remember family, friends, and all of those who hope for their safe return. May God grant them peace. Amen. Thank you for joining us today for our Remembrance ceremony, lest we forget.